Machiavelli wrote 6 rules that prove everything you were taught about being a good person was a trap designed to keep you manageable. I'm betting this channel's entire reputation on these principles, the same ones that Robert Greene built his 48 laws of power around. Not moral, manageable. There's a difference, and most people spend their entire lives never noticing it. If you're here for mindset shifts or positivity, leave now. This is a survival architecture for a zero-sum world, what game theorists call the kind of game where your win requires someone else's loss, and I'm staking my public credibility on every word of it. These aren't theories. These aren't ideas I'm floating. These are the 6 principles I'm willing to have this channel judged by permanently. We're counting down from 6 to 1, ranked by lethality. Number 1 will show you why your loyal inner circle is actually your greatest strategic liability, and how I'm using this very video to purge mine. The premise underneath all of it. The world doesn't reward virtue. It rewards what Machiavelli called virtù, effective execution. That's not pessimism, it's the operating system. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. The average person treats presence like a security blanket. They show up everywhere, always reachable, always available, always in the room. And they wonder why no one takes them seriously. Presence isn't power. Omnipresence is weakness in disguise. Here's why scarcity creates perceived value. This isn't complicated, it's basic economics applied to human attention. The person who's always available is never truly wanted. They're convenient. And convenient things don't get respected. They get used. Cardinal Richelieu understood this better than almost anyone in history. In the French court during the 30 Years' War, Richelieu's silence wasn't peace. It was a death sentence in waiting. He controlled that court not by being everywhere, but by being selectively invisible. When he wasn't in the room, the king's favorites started checking their necks for the blade. And here's what made it surgical. In the silence Richelieu left behind, his rivals would talk too much, reveal too much, and eventually hang themselves with their own words. He didn't have to spy, he just had to be absent. His absence created a pressure that his presence alone couldn't manufacture. People filled the silence with their own anxiety about what he might be doing, thinking, deciding. That anxiety was leverage. The logic is simple, but it requires discipline most people can't hold. Withdrawal isn't retreat. It's a controlled explosion of perceived value. Every time you make yourself scarce, you're running a pressure test on how much you're actually valued. And most people, the first time that test comes back negative, panic and flood back in. That's the mistake. The common error is confusing constant availability with loyalty. It isn't loyalty, it's submission. The person who's always available is announcing that their time costs nothing, that their attention is infinite, that you can reach them whenever you want. You've removed the cost of reaching you. And things without cost have no perceived worth. Start treating your presence like a limited resource because it is one. Not artificially, not performatively, but actually. Pull back. Let the room wonder. Watch what happens. Absence controls how others perceive you. But controlling perception is useless if they have a complete map of everything you know. The next rule seals that leak. Information is currency. What you withhold is worth more than what you share. Full transparency isn't honesty, it's strategic suicide. When you show everything you know, everything you feel, every card in your hand, you're handing your opponents a complete targeting system. You're not building trust, you're building a guide for anyone who wants to move against you. Cesare Borgia, the man Machiavelli based the prince on, ran one of the most dangerous political operations in Renaissance Italy, and one of his core survival tools was ambiguity. He never revealed his full hand, not to allies, not to rivals, not even to his father, Pope Alexander VI. And his father was the Pope, the man who gave Cesare his power, his armies, his political cover. Even he often didn't know if Cesare was starting a war or ending one until the messengers arrived. If the man who gave you everything can't predict you, no one can. That deliberate opacity kept everyone slightly off balance. Rivals couldn't accurately calculate the risk of crossing him because they couldn't accurately calculate what he knew, what he was planning, or what resources he had available. His allies stayed dependent because full clarity would have let them calculate whether they actually needed him at all. How this works in practice. Release information in calculated doses. Give enough to maintain the relationship, enough to appear credible and engaged, but never enough to let someone accurately model you. And here's the part that takes real discipline to trust. Let people fill the silence with their own assumptions. They'll always do this. Every silence gets filled, and the assumptions they generate about you will almost always be more favorable than your actual reality. Let them. Don't correct it. Don't rush in with transparency to make it accurate. The core principle. You gather, they guess. You're actively collecting information about what they know, what they want, what they fear, while they're working with incomplete data about you. That's not deception for its own sake. It's rigging the game. The operator with the more complete picture wins, not because they're smarter, but because they're working in reality while the other side is working in a story they told themselves. But controlling information is useless if your face gives away the secret. There's a leak in your strategy that no amount of silence can fix, and that's what Rule 4 plugs. The person who can't be emotionally provoked can't be controlled. Read that again. It's the whole rule. Every emotional reaction you display in a high-stakes situation is a lever someone can pull again. If they see you flinch at criticism, they'll criticize. If they see you heat up when your loyalty's questioned, they'll question it. If they see you deflate under pressure, they'll apply pressure. You've handed them a complete instruction manual for how to operate you. Marcus Aurelius didn't practice stoicism because it was fashionable or noble. He practiced it so he could watch a general betray him, watch an alliance collapse overnight, watch a city burn, and not lose the ability to calculate his next move. It wasn't a philosophy, it was a cockpit. He was commanding armies, managing advisors with competing agendas, making decisions under uncertainty where one emotional mistake could ripple into catastrophic policy. Detachment wasn't his personality, it was his armor. Load-bearing armor. As Epictetus taught before him, and as Marcus recorded in his meditations, controlling your responses was the only true free earn. The execution is brutal in its simplicity. Detachment isn't coldness, and it isn't suppression. You feel everything. That's not the issue. The issue is what you choose to broadcast. The sovereign operator runs one internal question, not do I feel this, but does broadcasting this serve my objective? Anger is information, fear is information, hurt is information. But the moment you transmit those signals without choosing to, you've surrendered the frame. Think about the last time you lost your temper, at work, with a partner, in a negotiation. You didn't just lose the argument, you handed them the remote control to your brain. You became a toy. They didn't even need to be smart to operate you. They just had to push the button they'd already identified and watch you perform. Picture your opponent sitting across from you, waiting for your eyes to twitch, waiting for your voice to crack, waiting for the jaw tighten or the breath to catch. They are hungry for it, and you give them nothing. That silence isn't weakness. It's the most aggressive thing you can do in that moment. I can already hear the objection. This sounds like suppression. It isn't. Suppression is stuffing things down until they detonate. Emotional sovereignty is selection, choosing what you transmit, when you transmit it, and what effect you intend it to produce. It's the difference between an accidental discharge and aimed fire. Here's a practical test. Next time someone tries to destabilize you, tries to provoke a reaction, embarrass you publicly, get under your skin, don't react. Treat it as intelligence gathering instead. Ask, what do they want from my reaction? What does getting that reaction give them? What do they lose if I don't give it? That reframe changes your position completely. They're trying to run an operation on you. The moment you identify it as an operation, you're no longer the target. You're the analyst. Emotional sovereignty protects your interior. The next rule weaponizes your exterior. Never fight on equal terms. Structure every exchange so the other person has more to lose. You've spent your life fighting fair, and you've spent your life losing to people who don't even know what the word fair means. Stop trying to win the fight. Start changing the rules of the game. Symmetrical conflict is a gamble. You're essentially flipping a coin, with extra steps. Asymmetrical conflict is a calculated extraction. When you've structured an interaction correctly, the outcome isn't uncertain. You've already won before it starts. Roman military doctrine understood this in ways that still haven't been fully absorbed by modern strategists. The standing directive wasn't be stronger. It was never engage an enemy at their chosen time and place. Force them onto terrain where your strengths become their weaknesses. Change the geography of the conflict before the conflict begins. The battle you win before it starts is the only kind worth having. As Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, supreme excellence is breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Here's the math of the exchange. Identify what the other party actually needs from this interaction. Not what they're saying they want, but what they need. Then become the sole supplier of it. Once you're the only source of something they need, the dynamic shifts completely. They can't pressure you effectively because pressure risks cutting off their supply. They can't ignore you because you're load-bearing to their objective. You've moved from participant to gatekeeper. Think about the employee who's the only one who knows how to keep the legacy server running. He can be late, he can be difficult, he can be expensive, and he's untouchable. That's not a bad attitude. That's architectural asymmetry. He didn't win by outmuscling anyone. He won by becoming irreplaceable to everyone. Dependency is the foundation of all durable power. Not fear, not admiration, not authority granted by title. Dependency. If someone needs access to something you control, information, relationships, skills, decisions, resources, and they can't get it elsewhere, your position is secured. The leverage doesn't require constant maintenance. It maintains itself. People think of power as personal force, dominance, charisma, aggression. Those are symmetrical weapons. Asymmetry is architectural. You're not trying to overpower someone. You're building a setup where they can't touch you even if they want to. We're almost at the two rules that will cost you the most and earn you everything. Asymmetry gives you the terrain, but terrain is a graveyard if you move at the wrong time. Rule 2 is why most strong men fail right at the finish line. Timing is the most underrated weapon in the arsenal. Moving too early is as fatal as moving too late. And most people never learn this because early failure looks like it's about something else. Amateurs burn their leverage the moment they feel it. They get a card and play it immediately. They get information and deploy it the same day. They feel an advantage and act on it before they've verified it's actually irreversible. The strategist holds, not because they're passive, because they're waiting for the moment when the action can't be undone, can't be countered, can't be reframed. The rule is simple. If you have the advantage but the outcome isn't yet irreversible, wait. Caesar crossing the Rubicon gets remembered as a bold move, an act of courage. But it wasn't impulsive. It was the end of a long, cold wait, an entire career spent positioning, building, watching, waiting for the exact moment when crossing that river would be an irreversible signal rather than a reckless gamble. Before that moment, crossing meant starting a war he might lose. At that moment, it meant announcing a war he'd already won. Same river, same action, different timing, different universe of outcomes. Build pressure silently. Don't announce you're building leverage, that's amateur. Let the situation ripen without interference. Let your opponent's position weaken naturally while yours consolidates. Then strike when they're already off balance. Not when you've just reached equilibrium, but when the gap is widest. The move you make when they're already stressed is 10 times as effective as the same move made in neutral conditions. The discipline required here is harder than it sounds because patience is usually misread as passivity, both by observers and by the person exercising it. It isn't. Strategic patience is controlled aggression in a waiting state. You're not doing nothing. You're doing everything except the final move. You're positioning, observing, building, testing. And you're resisting the enormous pressure that comes from having leverage and not using it, from seeing opportunities and letting them pass, from watching your opponent do things you could already counter while choosing not to. That restraint is what separates operators from reactors. Reactors can't help themselves, they have to play the card. Operators know that the right card at the wrong moment is just waste. And now, the rule I said would cost me the most to say out loud. Your reputation isn't your character, it's a weapon. One you design, deploy, and occasionally sacrifice for strategic gain. The masses protect their reputation the way they protect their ego, out of fear. Fear of what people will think, fear of being misunderstood, fear of the narrative running ahead of them. That fear makes the reputation brittle, because the moment someone attacks it, they're on defense, scrambling to correct, explain, rehabilitate. They've handed control of the story to whoever decided to tell it. The Machiavellian architect uses reputation differently. It's bait, it's armor, and sometimes strategically, deliberately, it's a controlled detonation device. Machiavelli himself is the most instructive case. His enemies weaponized his reputation as immoral, dangerous, the devil's author. They took the label and used it to bury him politically, discredit his work, make him radioactive in the very courts he'd spent decades trying to re-enter. And it worked, on a short-term, political level. But what actually happened to the work? The prince survived. The discourses on Livy survived. The actual clinical analysis of power mechanics survived everything they threw at the man's name. His reputation was destroyed. His ideas won. Because his ideas weren't dependent on his reputation being clean. He'd written a manual for surviving a world that had already abandoned morality, and every attack on his character only proved the point he was making. The irony of fortuna, what Machiavelli called the role of chance and circumstances, is that sometimes your reputation needs to be sacrificed to serve your larger objectives. Here's the confession that comes with this rule, the one that costs me the most to say. This entire video is a reputation play. I'm doing it right now, in front of you. By putting this channel's credibility on these 6 principles, by stating publicly I'm willing to be judged by them permanently, I'm demonstrating Rule 1 in real time. The people who watch this and feel uncomfortable, who think this is too far, who decide this isn't for them, that reaction is data. Not a problem to fix. Data. The people who unsubscribe over this are the ones who were never useful to the mission anyway. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. A reputation play is only effective if it's willing to actually sacrifice something. If you're not willing to lose anyone, you can't build a genuine filter. Design your public persona with the same intentionality as a military operation. Know what you want people to believe about you, what you want them to fear, and this one's critical, what you want them to underestimate. The things they underestimate about you are where your real options live. Let them think you're simpler than you are, less prepared than you are, more emotional than you are. Those underestimates are strategic real estate. The sovereign move isn't about managing what people think. It's about choosing which version of the truth serves your objectives, and building a machine around that version, rather than around your ego. These 6 rules aren't a philosophy. They're a survival architecture for a world that was never fair and was never going to be. You've been the good person for years. You played by the rules, stayed loyal, fought fair, and all it got you was a seat at the back of the room. These rules aren't here to make you nice. They're here to make you sovereign. From absence to reputation, each rule removes one more lever your opponents can pull. Absence means they can't weaponize your presence. Controlled disclosure means they can't weaponize your transparency. Emotional sovereignty means they can't weaponize your reactions. Intentional asymmetry means they can't fight you on equal terms. Strategic patience means they can't rush you. And the reputation play means they can't even weaponize your image against you, because you designed it. If you've got the stomach for the rest of the arsenal, subscribe, because what comes next goes deeper than this. And if you're still sitting there deciding whether this is too uncomfortable, that's the choice, right there. Stay comfortable and manageable, or claim sovereignty. Those are the only 2 options. There's no version where you get both.